Hey everybody, in episode 11, I'm speaking with Anthony Parker, a revenue leader helping companies launch or accelerate profitable growth in the UK, Europe, and EMEA. Anthony is MD for EMEA for the sales enablement platform Mindtickle, and so is in a unique position when it comes to sales enablement, both needing to enable his own sales teams as well as selling this as a service into other businesses. His perspective on how sales teams should best be set up and engaged is an important lesson for all sales leaders and sales enablement practitioners to understand. Anthony and I have very similar sense of humor, so I highly recommend connecting with him on LinkedIn to see his posts, which poke fun at the whole sales enablement industry, but also highlight some of the opportunities sales leaders and sales enablement teams have to make things better. Let's jump into the show. All right, Anthony, great to see you again, buddy. It's been a little while. So I think last time was it dinner in London? The last time we caught up.
Exactly. Normally, you only come out with me when there's a nice lavish dinner. So yeah, that was the last time we saw each other, just before Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'm from Bristol, so it's a lavish dinner when you're paying as well. So
Exactly.
you can take the man out of West Country, but there you go. But no, really, really excited to have a conversation. I remember when we caught up the last time. I think I was speaking at an event for you, and I said, I'm going to say something controversial. And you said, oh, I'm going to like this. So I'm expecting this conversation to get a little bit controversial, and we're okay with that, right? We're okay. Nobody will be hurt. Emotionally tickled, we'll call it that. But obviously, you're big in the world of sales enablement. You're leading kind of one of the sales enablement platforms across Europe. And yet, all I see you doing on LinkedIn is trashing salespeople or sales enablement people. Like the team are doing it as well. So, what's your take? Where are we at with sales enablement? Is it a real part of the sales play? Like, what's your take on sales enablement at the moment?
Yeah, good question. And I do like to think I'm an equal opportunities to anyone and everyone in revenue. So if you talk to marketing people in the last couple of weeks, the very few that follow me, I don't have many followers in general, but they're getting it this week. The following week, a week before that, it was salespeople. I just think that we all live in this sales and revenue world. Let's be honest, it is probably one of the craziest parts of business. I'm sure everyone knows what's going on in the tech world at the moment with layoffs. So I've got to be honest, I don't take a lot of things seriously. I do take my job and the profession seriously, but I do like to poke fun. There's many people doing it better than me, but I do definitely like to shine a light on it. And you're definitely right to say that light has been shone on enablement more than a few times. I've been working in the enablement field directly and specifically with enablement practitioners for the last 6 years. So I have lots of real conversations with sales enablement leaders, sales enablement practitioners, sales leaders who have enablement. So I do like to think that it's definitely done with a bit of love, but it's also done to challenge what I think is an underserved part of the sales and revenue organization, which is sales enablement. So yeah, a long-winded initial response to that, but it is done with love, but it is also done with more than a tinge of honesty, because I do feel like sales enablement more now than probably ever in the last 6 years need as an org needs to step up, and the individuals within it now need to do what we were talking about 3, 4, 5 years ago now. Otherwise, there could be challenges ahead.
I think all you're doing when you're doing this, and I like how you say you're an equal opportunity person. Nobody's immune. Is all you're doing is you're holding up a mirror, right? You're holding up a mirror to people, and if we look at the example from today, and I quickly checked out your LinkedIn earlier. It was a Dragon's Den video, and then there's two people, and the salesperson is royally messing up the pitch, right? They're stumbling through the words, and just got the hand on the back. Marketing's like, there, it's okay, you'll be all right. Sales like, I'm so sorry, but some people will look at that and go, I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense in my context. But some people, and I know many companies are like this, are saying, yeah, there's such a gap from marketing to sales and sales ability to continue the message. And so by shining a light on people, some people will get it and they'll associate, some people will not associate. But I guess you're looking for the people that associate and go, oh, we should probably do something about that.
Yeah, and there is a danger of giving me too much credit. I just like taking the piss out of things. However, in terms of this marketing and sales, I think anyone in marketing, I have a lot of friends. I'm going to do that. I have a lot of friends in marketing thing, but and those people that work with me and have worked with me will probably be laughing at that. But it is well known across all companies, no matter what size, that there is more of a disconnect than there should be. There's more of a disconnect than there needs to be. And there will be some organizations who will be disputing this and will probably be accurate. But my view has always been that if a salesperson talks in the way that marketing talk and asks them to talk about their product,
Yeah.
and it is a product, then it just falls so flat in the real world. And that's always been my opinion. Now, there are marketing people, and I work with some now, I've worked with some in the past, that don't do that. But generally speaking, you don't have to travel far on LinkedIn to find marketing people that speak in a way that doesn't resonate in the real world with buyers, because it's not problem centric, it's product. And look how great we are, look how many awards we've got, look at this, look at how much who cares? No one cares about any of that in the real world. It's about, what can you do for me and why should I listen to you? Now, I'm not saying we eradicate all of that, but there is a disconnect. And today's Dragon's Den, I thought, was a great example of a salesperson trying to articulate a, let's say, what's it called? An elevator pitch full of meaningless buzzwords that does not connect with the audience. And when they're delivering it, they're delivering it with no confidence. So they end up apologizing 3 times during a 30. So it's not a criticism of marketing. It's not a criticism of sales. It's just that's what happens when salespeople try to articulate messaging that they don't actually believe, and doesn't actually resonate out in the real world.
Salespeople have to have integrity. Right, and this is it, right? And that comes from a couple of things, but it comes in belief in what you're saying. And if, but I'm going to also challenge that is familiarity with what's saying. And I think this is, and as a sales enablement professional myself, the frustration is salespeople will try and remember something that marketing have taken months to craft. It's like, I'll give it to me in 30 seconds, and then wonder why they can't portray it in real life in such a fluid and kind of easy to understand way. So I think there's definitely a good case of holding up the mirror, and I do appreciate sarcasm. Oftentimes when I'm working at people, I'll send them a quick meme before. And I don't know if you've seen this one, you probably designed it yourself, but sarcasm gets you nowhere. Well, it got me to the 1992 Sarcasm World Cups in Mexico. Like, really? No. So I'll send that cartoon over, because if people get that, they'll understand me. So I think I'll share it with you afterwards. But one of the challenges I see as well is the disconnect, and you said it, is this: we all work under revenue, but oftentimes the KPIs of each department are completely separated, right? And so we end up with that breakdown. So marketing, what are you working on? Brand awareness or something along those lines, or number, it could be number of leads, but they don't care like the quality or anything like that. Then you've got your SDRs, they're working on lead conversion, but they're not even interested. So there seems to be a breakdown in process because of disconnection on the KPI front as well. Is that something that you've seen? And have you seen companies that are doing well, how they close the gap?
Yeah, and I think actually we're living that in my organization, Mindtickle, now. We've just brought in a president who sits above the whole of go-to-market. And to me, if you have somebody who sits above all of it, who's responsible for all of revenue, suddenly these silos and those internal battles hopefully will start to become less relevant or be more managed, because it doesn't happen, and I'm sure there's lots of people listening to this who work in organizations, and I've worked in them pretty much most of my life, where there is that disconnect, where marketing could be being celebrated, where sales are thinking, what the hell, we literally have seen nothing, and or sales are doing well and marketing think that that's against them rather than for them. It's at worst, it's toxic. At best, it's funny, but it is not productive, and it is something that I think thankfully companies are realizing that now. We're seeing sales enablement slowly becoming revenue enablement. We're seeing sales ops becoming rev ops, and we are seeing leadership becoming chief revenue officer that actually has responsibility for all revenue. And that doesn't necessarily mean they came from sales. They could come from marketing or wherever, but they have marketing, sales, solution consulting, business development, obviously normally into marketing, but those are reporting into one individual, and he or she has a responsibility. So that game, if you like, doesn't work when you have someone who's not interested in a game. They're interested in actual revenue. And I think I'm not going to try and remember off the hoof. I should have actually met, but there are some people on LinkedIn, and maybe I'll post a link to these people. But there are a lot of marketing people that are now talking far more about the language of revenue and far less about things that are meaningless to everyone unless you've got a KPI for, let's just get more quantity of leads in. And I think we are seeing people talking about dark funnels. People are talking about proper influence and only caring about revenue, which is what everyone should be doing. Enablement, BDRs, sales, marketing. And I think we are obviously nearer today than we've ever been at getting towards that. But obviously some companies do have a way to go to catch up.
Yeah, and it's that revenue umbrella. So you're talking, because marketing offering is an operational function, customer success is a customer support function. And instead of thinking of that as like having that revenue umbrella, so everybody's working on the same thing, which is customer lifecycle, right? Is the lifecycle of the customer and the revenue lifecycle, and all of that being aligned. Interesting. Oh, okay, cool. So organizations try and find a way of aligning KPIs, at least coming under this concept of revenue and targeting everyone to that, even if there are sub focuses, because you need to do that, right? Sometimes marketing will need to focus on something, sometimes it will lead you, whatever it is. Okay, well, let's not bash the general. Let's talk about, we're going to drop everybody else in sales enablement. Let's talk about you and your relationship with sales enablement now. So here's an interesting, we call it sales paradox, right? Is sales leaders want sales people selling as much of the time as possible. Sales enablement want to train and enable everything possible, from, well, it doesn't matter what. And then sales leaders will go, okay, well, but you can only have 10 minutes to do it. And there's this paradox of sales enablement is distracting from the real world of sales. Now, you obviously work for a sales enablement platform, so you have a meta message that kind of contrasts that. So what is your relationship like with sales enablement? How do you see them as a value add to your team? And how have you developed that over time?
Yeah, I think generally, because I see myself as I enjoy coaching and developing people. One of the reasons that I got into a leadership role is to do that coaching and development. Unfortunately, the real world is that as much as you want to do the coaching and development, the management part of it comes in, and the more wider your remit gets. And thankfully, my remit is getting more narrow, so I can get back to more of the fundamentals that I want to do. However, because I am somebody who does embrace coaching, development, and that from a Mindtickle perspective, that readiness of a sales individual, I think that whilst no relationship between interdepartments is always perfect, there's definitely mutual respect. There's definitely an understanding that we want ultimately the same thing. And I'm one of those people that will try and make sure that salespeople are protecting their time, because it's the scarce resource that anyone has generally. But for salespeople, there are so many demands put on them. A lot of them are pointless. A lot of them are down to their own inability to prioritize their own work and procrastination and being on LinkedIn and all of that good stuff. But what we want to make sure from an enablement perspective is enablement doesn't become a swear word, as in, let's do some enablement. And one of my memes was that of literally anything said by somebody, let's do some enablement. That is where it starts to become a real barrier. And I will myself push back. I will also, when I talk to hundreds of enablement practitioners throughout the year. My team talked to more than that, but it is always about trying to minimize the enablement and try and maximize the outcomes of whatever we're doing to get some, again, why are we doing something? who is suggesting this, and what is the outcome going to be, and who cares about that outcome?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time it's one person has one conversation with one person about something that's opinion based, and suddenly there's a whole program and initiative that's done, but there was no, if it had been more of a data decision, or maybe looking at what the outcomes are and how that could be measured, that could have just been somebody that was given some coaching or some advice one-on-one, rather than 400 people losing 2 days of their selling quarter.
2 days training back in the good old days. Wow. Pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, you have people for a week in a classroom. Oh,
exactly. But I'm not anti it, but I am anti it for the sake of it.
It's got to move a needle, and 5 days in a classroom has got to move a big needle a very long way.
Oh yeah.
My challenge with this, and this is, I'm with you, is like, let's do some enablement. Oftentimes, that's actually the request from sales leaders, and I think there's an education piece, and this is partly the reason for this podcast, right? Is to enable or educate sales leaders on what enablement can and cannot do. So let's take I had chatting about account management the other day. Let's do some training on account management. I'm like, well, we can. Like, specifically, what do you want? Just train them. And this is always a request. Okay, well, the challenge is, what's the behavior? What are you actually looking to get them to do? Because it could be a skill thing. It could be a knowledge thing. But there's so many other elements. It could be process. It could be resource. It could be compensation and commission on the back of it. Like, I might not be getting paid, and salespeople are going to chase some money all day, as they should. So if you go into a project like that, how do you position, or how do you know when to pull enablement in versus when to say we can structure this and change things internally?
Yeah, and I think, if I'm going to be very fair, and I should be, that is the biggest challenge, is that sometimes enablement are seen as, let's just give them everything to do and then moan at them when they do too much. Yeah. It's definitely something that happens, and I think everyone needs to take it almost like a giant step back and think, right, what that account management request may be the best thing for you and your organization, and it might be the thing that moves the needle and drives it, or it could just be that someone wanted to say something, so they said, let's do some account management training. So I think taking that big step back and also aligning it to, what are the company goals at that high level? And then what is the from a sales leadership, and I mean the most senior sales leader within that organization, what are their critical goals, and how can we then start coming down not too far before we can arrive at something that is an actual gap in terms of, so for I'm trying to think of an example as I'm saying it, but let's go for there's a lack of pipeline. Wow, there's a really novel a challenge that companies rarely face. So maybe there's a lack of pipeline, or there's a lack of the closed ratio is in single digits. There could be a myriad, as you mentioned earlier, of reasons for that. It could be that the stuff that's coming in inbound is not of a good quality. It could be that. It could be anything. So the first thing is to diagnose and baseline and understand, what is the reason for this. And again, we don't need to take months to do this, but what do we think? What's the hypothesis about what the problem is? And then let's forget all the things that enablement can't necessarily do but could influence. And then it could be, is what specifically is the problem? You're going to need to get feedback from managers. You're going to need to, either, if you've got a tool like Mindtickle for conversation intelligence, or I'm sure there's other more well marketed and branded conversation intelligence tools out there that others may be thinking of right now, but let's go with Cool AI of Mindtickle. You can go back and start, and I'm not talking about listening to hundreds and thousands of calls, but I am talking about looking at what the data says. Yeah. I'm talking about trying to find, is it poor qualification? The answer is almost certainly yes. So are they putting too much through that didn't have the basics? So could it actually be nothing to do with that? It could actually be a lack of understanding and implementation of MEDPIC. then once we start to take this big step back, what is the thing? It could be MEPIC, could be something else, could be qualification, could be discovery, it could be literally anything.
It could be, right?
But if we just let's do some training, we're definitely not going to hit the right thing. But let's try and find as quickly as possible what we think the challenge is that applies to most people, that we can at least have some sort of data to back it up. We can have a wide range of sales leadership and management, and also asking salespeople themselves to try and identify if what they think is the gap matches what the data is saying, and then fix that one thing in this current quarter without distracting with other little programs and things like this. Let's just focus on that one thing, get it done really well, and wait and see what that is doing in a couple of weeks, because we can find a KPI or a metric or something measurable before we then go, oh, that's done. What's our next initiative? So it's like, do less, obviously, again, do less, not less with more, but have more impact with less time and energy and effort and burn, because then you're going to start getting respect of salespeople, of managers. Most importantly, the sales leader is then going to start seeing Enablement as a partner rather than a glorified event planner and trainer.
Yeah, and so I think there's two things in here. There's definitely the education piece for sales leaders. I think that's huge. Mm-hmm. Knowing that you can't just say, give us some training on this and it's going to be fixed. I think there's a project element that does often need multiple points. But I've always said this, Enablement works on conversion rates. So it's finding where the conversion rate breaks, fix that little problem, and then just does it trickle through? If it does, great, you fixed it. If it doesn't, or it does, but then it moves somewhere else, go and fix that. And basically opening the pipeline. You can't do volume, that's a management thing, but you can do conversion rates through Enablement, I think. And then the other one then is, like you said, it's Enablement. It's just it's a curse, right? To be Enablement, you want to please people. You want to say yes and make people happy. So you instinctively want to go and do more because you want the chance and the opportunity. But by doing that, you're actually doing a disservice. And so not slowing things down, but going deeper into a specific area. And like you say, if you can solve a big challenge like this in a half an hour or rather than 3 days, that's where you earn. And the question that we had at the event was, how does Enablement get a seat at the table? And it's that, right? It's Enablement finding a way to profile the impact they can have on a business.
Yeah, and I feel like in the past, certainly during this latest boom, obviously we're now coming out of that now. Suddenly no one's interested in growth at all costs for some reason. There seems to be a slight change there. But during that growth at all cost period, let's be honest, there's a lot of people, unfortunately, and I take zero pleasure. It sounds, because I'm conscious of the tone, I take zero pleasure, obviously, in people that are employed, that have families losing their jobs. Zero pleasure in that. The challenge that happened is companies were just throwing money at the problem. So there were sales enablement departments, and they would typically focus on onboarding and other things like that, and very much reactionary. Let's just keep going while this wheel is going. And unfortunately, that was never going to end well. It's just a case of what point somebody wakes up and realizes. Now we're in this efficiency, productivity. People are talking about CAC and LTV to CAC ratios. All of this stuff is suddenly matters, which it always has done. Yep. So now I think, conversely, sales enablement, who during that period probably weren't doing the things that we're talking about now, are now being seen as a cost. So I'm seeing sales enablement people losing their jobs when they're actually the most senior person. I'm hearing departments of sales enablement are being completely removed and replaced with specialist coaching and stuff like this. And all of this is coming about, in my opinion, because sales enablement came in at a time of plenty. They came in at a time where people, and this has nothing to do with sales leadership, boards, VCs, were going, right, let's hire 100 people, give them $1 million target, and at the end of the year, we've done 100 million. Brilliant. Which we all know doesn't work.
Maths works.
The challenge
is maths.
Exactly. So Enablement were just really focusing on, right, okay, let's get these onboarded. But there was very rarely, unfortunately, the fact is, very rarely, and I'm going to say around less than half or maybe half of the time, would enablement be able to go, right, our metrics that we are measuring our onboarding program again is time to first sale, time to second sale, time to pipeline, time to productive, and actually genuinely reporting that. And nobody was really asking them to, because money was being spent like this.
Yeah. And then you turn around and the money's gone. It's like, you guys, what do you do?
Yeah. What is this department? We're not onboarding anyone anymore, so we don't need them.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, they don't just do onboarding. Okay, we're not going to be going and spending loads of money in Vegas, so we don't need that event plan. Well, we're not event planners.
Yeah.
So I think now is the time for people. And some of my memes are born out of frustration. And 9 months ago, I posted one. It wasn't particularly funny, but it took me about 30 seconds. About 50% of enablement departments are a cost.
Yeah.
Is what I said, and I truly feel that is or was the case. And unfortunately, the consequences of looking like a cost, sounding like a cost, acting like a cost is you'll get treated like one, and you'll be seen as a line item, and that line item will just have a line through it. And that is frustrating to me. And as a sales professional, it's annoying, because at the end of these programs are salespeople, BDRs, account managers who are paid good money, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And they need a coach, they need a mentor, they need guidance, and they're not always getting it from their frontline manager. And it's Enablement's job to give them that readiness. And that's what frustrates me. And that's where there is that line shone on everything that frustrates me. I try and do it from a sarcastic or ironic point of view. But it is genuinely frustrating that Enablement, the job of Enablement is to make salespeople better.
Yeah.
And that includes bringing the managers in and not making excuses for the managers on their behalf. Managers have got enough excuses up their sleeve. Don't have Enablement making excuses, oh, they're too busy. How can they be too busy to do their job and also help scale Enablement?
Exactly. And that's, I've experienced this, and, I experienced the 50% element as well. When I was at WeWork, we had to let go of half the team. I mean, that's a complete different story, but that is one of those rapid growth, rapid shrink. It's like the biggest story of that and in the history of time. But we had to evolve as a team. Then we had to evolve. We were doing front end training, and we were like, "That's not going to cut it. We don't need to do this anymore. What do we do?" And actually moving to more of an enablement mindset was that. It was like, okay, let's go to projects. Let's attach to teams. Let's figure out what they want, and then let's go. So I managed to do that. But yeah, I've seen good enablement people going at the moment, like you say, because it's a cost, and let's get rid of cost. One of the other arguments, and here's a fun thing I'd be keen to get your take, is no other team has an enablement function. Like, we don't have a marketing enablement function. We don't have a product enablement function. I mean, you have product enablement from a marketing perspective, but there's no team to make the product team better. So why should, in your opinion, should we either eliminate sales enablement and have everybody on a level playing field, or should we give the other teams an enablement function as well? What do you think?
Yeah, good, very good question. My gut reaction to that is that the challenge that is faced by sales versus marketing and others, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a marketing enablement. Again, there should be a revenue enablement function that sits above all of this. So lots of companies of different sizes will have specialist BDR enablement people. They will have SC enablement or account management enablement, or whether it's called that or not, that's essentially their role. It could be sales actors or whatever it is. Unfortunately, as with all companies, there's silos. Yeah. As with all companies, there's if the most senior sales enablement person, who in my opinion should be called revenue enablement, because they should sit above it all and disseminate it all so there's consistency. If that happens, then I think that naturally lends itself into product marketing, who do a lot of good stuff, despite a couple of the jokes that I've posted and the stuff that I talk about. They do an awful lot of good work. They understand their product. A lot of the time, they actually do understand the problem that they solve. They tend to not always articulate that as well as they articulate the features. but they need enablement because when they get their messaging across to sales, they are diluting it because they're not doing it in a way that is actually, it's only going to be dangerous because it will only be adopted by people who don't know what they're doing from a sales perspective, who will then, back to the meme, repeat it, and they'll repeat it in a way that is, then you go back to LinkedIn and you see, oh, they're talking about their features. They're talking about all of their G2 awards. They're bringing up a NASCAR logo slide and talking about how this is where that disconnect happens. And again, revenue enablement, which includes marketing and all of those departments that you mentioned, that has to happen. The challenge that I see is because of everything that I mentioned around sales enablement not really getting to that level, it's not as easy to convert that sales enablement leader into a revenue leader as it is to do sales ops into revenue ops or a CRO into whatever that would be.
Okay. So sales enablement, let's get better. Let's get to projects. Let's show value. Let's add value to the business. Let's not be seen as a cost center. Okay, that's really good advice. So one of the things you talked about earlier was data. And, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to data, anybody would tell you, and constantly looking for the things to manage. You've obviously talked a bit about efficiency as well and salespeople making sure they use their time effectively. And now all sales teams are being asked to be more efficient, right? Especially in tech, like you said, we're seeing shrinkages in teams, but no shrinkages in goals. Yep. Where do you see that efficiency coming from? Like if you're talking to your sales team, where are you advising them to find time or find resources to be more efficient? What does that conversation look like between you and your team?
Yeah, and I think again, it's similar. It's a similar thing to it's a similar thing that we spoke about with enablement in terms of that taking a couple of steps back. As a salesperson, there are lots of meetings that are sent to you without agenda. There are lots of things you're told to do. There are lots of all hands calls. There's lots of demand on a salesperson. There's lots of internal meetings. Sometimes we've moved away from this model, but sometimes a new business person might have at least 4 or 5 hours a week of talking to a client success team about an existing customer. There's a lot of demand. And then on top of that, salespeople don't like or enjoy doing the thing that actually matters the most, which is demand gen. Call it what you like, but I'll just call it cold calling, warm calling, messaging, building. They don't like doing that. And that is the bit that matters probably as much, as more as anything, because pipeline cures a lot of the problems. It cures a lot of the desperation. It cures a lot of the stress. If you go into a quarter with real pipeline that is free time, I mean, people are looking for 5. Yeah. I'll just say, if you go into with real qualified pipeline and not just one deal that is 3 times your target, and it is more than hopefully 3 times your call, you are going to be in a much different mental state than somebody who comes in and they haven't even got coverage for 80% of their actual target.
Exactly.
It's a totally different world. But the problem is when we don't run a calendar quarter, but let's just pretend we do. End of March, let's just say that's the end of quarter. As you go into April, in most companies, your quarter is already decided as you get towards the end of April. There is nothing you can do in panic mode. Suddenly start doing a bit of it. Is what you do now is going to impact you in the summer and the winter of this year. And unfortunately, some salespeople that are not successful and are not effective allow too much of the stuff that doesn't matter, and also allow themselves to be distracted and not prioritize. And as a result, they have real challenges. So unfortunately, it is the boring, you need more pipeline, you need to do stuff, but there is nothing else other than progressing opportunities and making sure that the experience of the prospect and the customer is really good. There is nothing else as important as going out there and creating new pipeline and doing good discovery and qualification.
Yeah. Top of funnel solves everything, right? Makes everybody's life a lot more relaxed. And like I said, if everyone can walk into a pipeline meeting 3x coverage, then we're all happy. It's not. This is the, and there was a guy I worked with. It's recognizing the proportion of that as well. And so some people will not see it as their role, and they'll expect SDR to do everything or marketing to do everything. And I think you've got to appreciate that there's a proportion that comes from that. There's a proportion that comes from that. But let's say marketing goes quiet, as it does sometimes, or especially at the moment. You still got to get that, so you got to make it up somewhere. So spending a bit more time on the prospecting side is going to be important.
Yeah, and if you're, and I'm going to be generalize here, and it's not an accurate generalization because BDRs are all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of ages, all sorts of stages of life. However, quite often those BDRs are younger. They're in their early 20s. They're in their first or second or maybe third job. If you're a enterprise salesperson who's been doing it for 10, 15 years, you're in your late 30s, early 40s or whatever, and you're relying on somebody that young, new and inexperienced to do essentially your job for you, and then you think coming to somebody and going, oh, my BDR shit. No. The BDR is the icing on the cake or the cherry on top of the cake. And I think this is what's going to happen with this efficiency. It's going to shine a light on those people that were coasting it, and it's not all. Again, I can say everyone individually. It's not. It's everyone collectively. But salespeople who are doing less than 60% of their target year in year out for multiple years as a result of the overhiring, but also not doing the things to get them out of that. Unfortunately for them, those days are over now because everyone's looking at the efficiency and productivity of AEs now in the way that they always should have done. Not to hire and fire, but again, it is a business.
Yeah,
it is a business. It's ruthless. Probably not as ruthless as Formula One. I'm not a Formula One fan, but I do like the documentary. And you get young 20-something-year-old kids put into a Red Bull car. They have 2 or 3 bad races and bang, they're out of it. That's the reality where people are paid more money, which is sales. Salespeople are paid a lot of money. It's because most people, including some salespeople, can't do the job. That's why people are paid money. Yeah. If everyone could do sales, it would be a minimum wage job. Exactly. Most people can't do sales, even people who think they can't. So if you're doing it and you're not doing the foundational things of getting better off your own back, if you're not really deeply concentrating and focusing and prioritizing, you are not going to be as successful, and sooner or later that success is going to get so low that you are going to fall into that cost.
Yep.
Because there is a cost of a salesperson, and they will then be, and that's what becomes, it's hire and fire. It's not hire and fire. It's unfortunately or fortunately, because I actually enjoy it, it's a performance business, and you can't. There's nothing worse to me hiding in a company for 5 years doing nothing. That to me would genuinely depress me.
It's frustrating. I would, and in my role, I get to see that. I'm like, come on, motivate yourself.
Yeah.
No. Really good book if you're interested is No Rules Rules. It's the Netflix culture story. It's really interesting. Netflix has got a pretty ruthless culture, but actually, if you look at it, it's a performance culture, and getting in nothing but all-star players. And they talk about talent density and this kind of idea here, which is we'll pay more for the better team members because you'll get as talent density increases, you drive it up. But that does mean you've got to keep an eye on the poor performers, and then they need to leave. But they're generous with the way to do it. Sounds ruthless, but they don't talk about family. They talk about they're a professional sports team. It's you got to get the best person on the field.
I mean. Unfortunately, companies that were doing the family thing and then made loads of layoffs are now suddenly starting to go back to this nickname. I don't mind if my company are doing it; they may well be, but we're definitely not doing this family thing because it's not it's a team, and the team hopefully all want the same thing, which is success. They want to make friends.
Yeah.
They want to have relationships that will transcend the company you're in. It is not a family. I wish I could lay off some of my family, and I'm sure my family wish they could lay me off. But you can't call it family. It's fake and it's insincere. And the companies that do it the most, everyone knows who they are. I'm not going to say them. I alluded to them maybe earlier in this call. But those sort of companies can't get away with being fake anymore because you can't call yourself family and then, unfortunately, we've had to lay off 20% of our family. It doesn't ring true. It is a performance sport, sales, revenue, but in that is that desire to get better, is the ability to get better, is the ability to change your life, to change lots of things about. You have so many opportunities, and let's be honest, if you're a salesperson who can create their own pipeline, if you can do that stuff, and this is why I find inbound BDRs is one of the, to me, it's one of the worst jobs ever. An inbound BDR, there is no skills that are going to set you up for sales. Yeah. Zero skills other than doing a checklist qualification. Outbound BDRs, if they can nail that and they can keep that skill and develop, and it is genuine outbound, they are going to be untouchable if they carry those skills on. Because that is a skill that is very hard to teach someone once they get to the age of 30.
One of the questions I asked now at the beginning of when I'm training SDRs is, would you classify the person at the front desk of a well-known burger joint? I will mention no names because they're all the same. But would you classify that person as a salesperson? And it's interesting is the reactions. And most people go, yeah, that's a salesperson. Okay, well, what defines a salesperson? Well, they ask you questions and things like that. Okay, what questions would they ask you? Oh, would you like fries with that? Oh, yeah, okay, would you supersize? I'm now kind of hinting as to where it is. I don't think they're allowed to say that anymore. But then I ask the question, say, okay, what happens when you say no? And they say, well, they stop asking. They just take the order. Is that okay? So do you still classify them as a salesperson, or are they just an order taker? Maybe they do some of the things that salespeople do, but the skill of a salesperson is they go to work when they hear no. Right? That's actually when the work starts. The rest of it's up to theirs, table stakes. Like you say, you pay minimum wage for that. But what happens after the first no is where the skill is.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely, in that industry, you can definitely see people, and my daughter worked for McDonald's, and so did my son, actually. They both worked for McDonald's before they went for uni. I think the main transferable skill of that is dealing with people and finding out how annoying and incredibly stupid some people are. However, the abuse my daughter got when the 11 o'clock rule comes in is just incredible. But to carry on your analogy, I think that there is that thing from a salesperson point of view, being able to create something from nothing. And this isn't about, I'll have to say Inuits now because you can't, selling ice to Inuits. That is not a skill that I'm interested in. I want somebody to go and, if somebody has a problem, don't sell them ice, sell them a heating system. Yeah. Sell them something that actually solves a problem that they've got. And you don't do it by talking about the features of your heating system. You do it by finding out how much of a pain is this for them? Have they solved it? Why has this been going on for 10 years? These are the traits of a modern salesperson who's not trying to sell at all costs. They're not trying to win. Yeah. They are trying to genuinely help. Yep. And they are only going to recommend or prescribe something once they realize that there is actually a problem that is worth solving, and not just the person they're talking to, but the business cares about. And I think that's modern selling. It is not persuading people, or it's influence, not persuasion.
No, I agree with this. Everything has to be holistic, and this is the challenge, right? The sale has to be holistic, especially if we're looking under revenue now, right? Because if that stays under revenue when it moves to customer success, all of a sudden I can't just go, see ya, just throw the grenade over, because that's going to come back at some point and impact me in that way. So, and I agree. I think the ability to generate interest, where people, I think for me, and this is the reason why I've studied it so much, is this idea of status quo. Salespeople are good. Good salespeople are good at disrupting status quo. That's the thing that they do the best. They take, and I say, the reason people don't like salespeople, I call you up in the morning, you've got no problems. Yeah. I have a conversation with you, suddenly you've got a problem that you didn't have before, and the only thing that's different is the salesperson. So salespeople bring problems, but if they do it right. What else do you see as the traits? What do you want your salespeople to be doing? What do you want them to be good at? Where are you asking them to grow and get better? at the moment?
I think for me, the foundational and fundamental skills that people overlook, and it is quite scary, I think, is the absolute fundamentals. So discovery, actually having a good fluid discovery approach that isn't asking stupid questions like what keeps you up at night, or asking 6 questions that you could have found out by just doing some research the day before. Yeah. All it is incredible how bad a lot of people, and again I'm going to go the 50%. 50% of salespeople, I think, run horrendous and at times cringy discovery. And I think that is an area that enablement should be focusing on a lot more. I think managers should be. Now, let's be honest, 50%, if 50% of salespeople can't do it, it stands to reason that some of those 50% who can't do good discovery still manage to sell. Because I used to be awful, truly awful about 20 years ago. I was going to President's Club. So it doesn't matter if sometimes not being very good. Exactly. Sometimes not being very good doesn't stop you. Yeah. But those people then become managers. So having managers train people on stuff that they can't do when you're not, how much money is spent on training salespeople versus training managers to be effective coaches? I think it's less than 10%. What do you think?
The amount, there's not enough investment in managers training. Here's a frustration for me is enablement never gets there. We can never quite get to manager. So the tiers of this, right? So it's onboarding, solve all those problems you talked about, manager training. Manager training, if you can get there, and I call it you can turn the head. If you're the neck, you turn the head, right? You can reinforce everything, but because there's so many gaps down the bottom, and like you say, managers then just reinforce the things that they did, which they reinforce that they did, and you've just got this this kind of cascade of nonsense.
And that's another area that I am one, but I turn there are so many sales managers who give it the big and behind the scenes. Oh, go and do this, go do that. You get them on a call. Oh, they panic. They overpromise. They discount. They step up. It is scary what managers do, and then the credibility that they lose for themselves, for the AE, for the company, and no. This is probably why I spend most of my time frustrated is because this is quite an easy thing to solve if people just cared about it. And I feel like this environment now, people might care about it more. Yeah. 20 years ago when I was not particularly good at my job, but I was in Rome on President's Club, no one really knew. Today, there's enough things that somebody would have identified that perhaps I wasn't doing and I had no coaching, I had no real training. Probably I was of a mindset that if I was given training, I would have attended it as if I knew it all. That's the challenge. But in this day and age now, I really do think that there's no excuse for companies not to at least have a level of 7.5, 8 out of 10 across the board when it comes to things like discovery, qualification. Demos is another one which brings in a new group, SCs. I mean, it's almost never ending. The good news is I'm going to retire before any of this has been solved, but I will spend the next 10, 15, 20 years trying to help be part of it because I think it is something that is worth doing and it will benefit everyone to at least attempt to do it.
When it comes to the data, you've got to be able to score. You said everyone's got to be at a 7.5 or 8 or above to create a quality sales engagement, but how are we measuring that? And that comes down to, do you have the right systems in place? Not all of them, just the select ones that you need to actually check quality, not just quantity. I think quality, we're going to see quality coming through the roof in terms of priority in the future as we look at smaller teams. It involves managers spending time with their reps to give the feedback and create that feedback loop. And then it involves training and enablement, finding a way to say, okay, well, we can improve this bit, we can improve this bit, and we can do it in a quick, consolidated way, not fast, but not take 3 days to do things because I'm targeting this tiny little thing, which I know if we can release that valve, then everything is going to get a bit better. But I'm with you on discovery. Yeah, I call it doing an AJ. We'll get into that story another time. Try and protect the innocent. Anthony, I loved at the beginning of this, before we catch up, it's like, oh, don't let me go off on a rant. Don't let me go off on a rant. But I love at times of this, you've been short of breath just because you've gone off and really, you said the things that people need to hear. And this is like I said earlier, some people are going to hear this and go, that doesn't reflect our organization at all. And congratulations.
Yeah.
Like that's
Exactly.
the goal, right? If you don't recognize any of those things, then just give yourself a gold star now and take the rest of the day off. But if you do recognize these, then take it as the way it's been delivered, which is tongue in cheek with the irony and the sarcasm, which is intended. And then I guess what should leaders be asking themselves if they hear this and go, geez, I recognize this? What should they be asking themselves?
Yeah, I think that there's the top down, which I think the top down is going to get better because of this environment, this new reality of efficiency, productivity, caring about the unit economics is going to force from the top down companies to be focusing on better things. Hopefully they do it in a way that includes revenue enablement. Hopefully they do it in a way that includes managers and getting them up to speed, and hopefully all of that. So that's the top down, if you want to look at it like that. But I think how people should be looking at this, and I know there'll probably be more leaders looking to this than individual contributors, but I do think it also falls upon the individual to not use any of this as an excuse, to not use the fact that maybe their manager isn't great at X, Y, and Z. They might be good at managing, but not necessarily coaching. That's fine. There's lots of other ways in this day and age to get access to good coaching. You can actually pay for it. I know I said no rants, and 4 times I've smiled at that. I will keep this brief, but look how much people are paying ex-Salesforce salespeople and others who are selling courses and programs and coaching. I think some of those are charging 10, 15, 20K, and salespeople are paying that out of their own pocket. There is a need for that, but salespeople don't need to do it. If you've got it, do it, because I'm sure it will work. But there are lots of other ways of doing it if you just A, care, and then B, take responsibility. So I think it's a two-way street. But if I'm an individual contributor and I'm looking to grow and develop and be successful, don't wait for the top down. Hopefully join a company that has some of these. No, I don't think there's any company on earth that has all of them solved, but some of them solved, and you can see on RepView, which I would recommend far more than Glassdoor from a sales perspective. Look on RepView and see if that culture is right. So take ownership, take accountability, but also hopefully join a company or push to be in a company that is actually getting this right now with that top-down approach and that laser focus on the things that matter.
Yeah, so join a sales culture where it's supportive and encouraging the growth with a team that can be sustainable, right? So I think that's important. And then as an individual, having that growth mindset, which we talked about on a podcast recently, just growth mindset. Whether it's pushed on you, you should be the one that's always pushing to get to the next level. Anthony, this has been a lot of fun. I'm so glad we got to do this as well.
Yeah, me too.
We've talked about your memes. We've talked about your rants on social. How can people find you? Is it just LinkedIn, or are you kind of taking out billboards to push this stuff as well?
No, I'm literally just on. Yeah, if you're interested in anything that we've spoken about, I'm more than happy for anyone to connect with me, message me, whatever. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best. It's probably the only place that I actually am. So if you're interested in hearing more, you can follow me on LinkedIn or just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and that's it. So follow and like Anthony's content. It's brilliant. Like I said, if you recognize it, then do something about it. If you reach out to Anthony directly, you better do it well. Otherwise, a gift's coming your way. Anthony, thanks very much for today, my friend. It's been really good to catch up. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Cheers, Dan. Take care, mate. Bye.
You know what I think, Ron? I think that was a sales call. Good job, buddy.
So you're going to buy a subscription?
No, I already get the Times.
Bye-bye.